Okay, so it's just going to be a little brief video, as usual. No, I'm trying to keep them short, and it's going to be around the row of rose, as the title suggests. I'm going to do like an indie one, a niche one, and a designer one, just to keep it kind of interesting. And my favourite roses, they all, to be fair, have quite a similarity about them. So we'll start at the... So starting with the niche is from Matiere Premier, and it's called Radical Rose. This one I only have a sample of. I think I'm going to buy one of them cute little minis of it. And this, it gets compared to Portrait of a Lady. Not to me, don't think so. Also, I think it reminds me of one that might be coming up on my list, maybe a little bit more. It's basically this... There must be more than one sort of rose in it, but to me it's this incredible, sweeter, darker, kind of jammy rose. And there's a lot of patchouli in it. It's a little bit earthy, but it tends to be the kind of sweeter patchouli that I pick up on most. Not too sweet, it's not overly chocolatey or dense or too much. But what's also around there is some really beautiful musks. And there are of course other florals in there which you don't really pick out individually, but it adds to the fragrance and adds a bit of sweetness and takes it in its own direction. Whereas for me, I shouldn't be comparing them really, but Portrait of a Lady is much drier. This is much kind of darker, if you like, gothier, kind of a bit denser, but it's not heavy, if that makes sense. But anyway, like I said, keeping it very brief, that is Matiere Premier's Radical Rose. So now we're going to move on to indie. Now what we class as indie is by, whatever, an independent small niche house. And I don't think you could get more indie really than Erin Terence Hughes. Now I'm talking about the fragrance that I tried originally quite a while ago, and they all kind of get reformulated and they all sort of change a little bit, different names and such like, but this one's kept the same name, and this is talking about it when I sampled it, and I've got quite a big, about 5 ml of it left. It's a beautiful one, and that is Onyx. This is one I wish I bought originally. It used to, when Erin first started, did little 30 ml bottles. I think it might have been called something else then. Or am I thinking of a different fragrance? Perhaps. Anyway, it was a bit cheaper back then. But Onyx basically is this plummy, it's plum and rose. And the plum gives it that dark purple feel in with this beautiful dark rose. And the plum, it adds, it's a purple, but it's not like a violety purple. It's so much, obviously we know what plums smell like, that darker, sweeter, denser, juicier feel. And it just mingles with the rose to give this really dark, is maroon kind of, a maroon kind of dark purpley red kind of thing. And it's got patchouli, which gives it a little bit of a chocolatey hint. It's got Erin's really quite unique but certainly recognisable musks in there, and it all comes together to make, again, slightly darky, gothy type, very sensual, just a lovely, juicy, dense, warm rose. And it's one of my favourites from Erin by a long way. Like I say, it's one that I do eventually need to get a bottle of. But if you're looking for a darker rose plum kind of, like a sweet rose, this is the one. I think it's one of the best indie fragrances I've smelt, and it's one of Erin's earliest. So again, it's just beautiful. So that's Onyx from Erin Terence Hughes. And finally, the designer. Whether you want to call this a designer or not is irrelevant. By fact, it is a designer fragrance, and that's Tom Ford's Noir de Noir. Yes, it's a very expensive one, probably overpriced, but that's all subjective, innit? I mean, it's up to you. But this is my biggest love of rose. This is, as we know it, that again quite dark, gothy, vampy, patchouli rose. the rose is really dark and jammy. It's got a truffle in there, which to me gives it a bit more of a kind of earthy texture. Again, making you think of that ground, that hallowed ground that a vampire would lie in. And the chocolate adds the sensuality from the patchouli. And it's just a very, very lovely one. And the rose is kind of this, it's described as like a black rose, yeah, but also like a blood red rose in there, like you've pricked your finger on a thorn and it's the blood dripping down. It's that kind of rich, reddy, jammy rose. Not that blood's rich or jammy. I suppose to vampires maybe it is, that's why they drink it, who knows. Anyway, that is Tom Ford's Noir de Noir. So yeah, that's obviously a very brief one again, but it doesn't need to be long. It's just like brief little introductions to them. I've actually probably got reviews of most of these, and they definitely will be on my Instagram, but it's just a brief introduction to my favourite roses. And as we all know, roses are no, I really struggle with. I either detest it or I really like it, and to be fair, there's probably only a handful, well more than that, but roses I actually like. Sometimes it could be very green and herbaceous, geranium-y, sharp, bitter, and just not very pleasant to me, but people like them fresher roses, whereas I tend to go for a more dense, darker rose. I'm not sure I'm necessarily a fan of patchouli, but I do tend to like it when it goes with that. And it's much fuller and more voluptuous and more kind of rosy, if you like a candied rose, I suppose. And that's my favourite type of one. I mean, there are more I could have put in this list, but this was just kind of brief, so I'm going to keep it brief and not waffle on. What about you? What's your favourite rose fragrance from each of these categories? As you can see, there's not much difference. Whatever the label of the roses are, they're still the same quality. They still smell as good. They still, you know, last whatever, if that's your jam and all of that. But primarily what it shows is I have a specific type of rose that I like. It tends to be sweeter, darker, more kind of gothy, kind of fuller rose. Alright folks, thanks, bye.